Every chess player has himself or herself asked at one point what grandmasters make that their games look so easy, their wins so smooth. Well, one of the reasons is that they find hidden resources and their calculation skills are superb. Take the position next to me. It is white to move. White can play the very obvious move queen takes d4, just winning a pawn. But maybe there is a better move. Try to find it and let me know in the comment section what you would play here. So now let's go to the game and see if you found the right move. Grand Master Kovchan playing the white pieces opens with first e4 and his young opponent responds with c5, a Sicilian, knight to f3, e6, d4. So we have an open Sicilian, and after the moves knight to f6, knight to c3, knight c6, we have the so-called 4-knight variation where white has a couple of choices such as knight d to b5, and now the most common responsive is d6, and now a very strange looking move, bishop to f4, but the idea is to force e5, and after bishop to g5 get Schweschnikow Sicilian. The structure and the position is exactly the same, so usually a6 is played here, and now knight to a3, b5, and the game continues normally. But this is another type of Sicilian which black must be ready to play. However, there is a way to avoid this by playing bishop to b4, and this move, bishop to b4, is a thematic move in a lot of variations in the 4 knights Sicilian. So let's say a3 here. Now the bishop is forced to take on c3, knight takes c3. White enjoys the pair of bishops, and the score in general is better for white here, but the position should be okay for both sides. Of course, white might be a little bit better. And as I said, there are a lot of ideas with bishop to b4 against g3, for example, against bishop to b4, and also against bishop to e3, bishop to b4. And now you guessed it, white doesn't want to allow bishop to b4, so plays a3, one of the recently popular moves, and avoids bishop to b4. Now black has a choice. Black can play a move like bishop to e7, then might follow knight takes c6, a very thematic move in the 4 knights. Taking the c6 knight is a possibility very often, even a move earlier, but this is not an opening video, so we are going to focus on the game. So here, for example, just to show you the ideas, b takes c6, e5, knight to d5, queen to g4, attacking this weak g7 square. And here I found something very interesting. A few players here castled, and this looks somehow strange because this allows bishop to h6, and then comes g6. And the thing here is that the move bishop takes f8 here is not that good for white, because bishop takes f8, let's say knight to e4 centralizing the knight, and now bishop to g7 hitting the e5 pawn, queen g3 defending it, and now queen to b6, and now you can see this pawn is rather weak, and black might also play rook to b8, a very thematic move here, and very importantly the 4 knights. So long castle, then of course rook to b8, if not long castle but rook to b1, then black must centralize the queen and attack the pawn here, and is already better, or on the verge of getting a better position. Bishop to d3, bishop takes e5, and black has a nice position. White must play very precise in order to keep everything together, and it is possible that c3 is already the only good move here. The position, according to the engine, is equal, but for human beings it's very difficult to play this. especially with the white pieces. Let's say bishop takes g3, and now this pawn structure of white is really not so nice. The bishop just retreats to c7, and it doesn't look very nice for white. So let's go back. Of course, white is not forced to take on f8 immediately. He can, for example, also push the h pawn and try to create a weak king here. But let's go back to the game. In the game, something very different was played. Queen to c7. And this move allows white to go bishop to e3. Now a6 was played, preventing any knight to b5 ideas, and now white plays very active here with the move f4. Now black reacts with a standard move d6, and now we see a Scheveningen structure a6, e6, d6, as you can see. And a very topical move here almost always is the move queen to f3, and it might be one of the critical tests. In this position, again, bishop to e7 is one of the main moves, then might follow long castle, short castle, knight takes c6, as mentioned, a very thematic move, b takes c6, and now g4 trying to attack on the king's side. However, white must watch out for a few things here. Let's say d5, white plays g5, knight to d7, h4, and now comes the typical move in these positions, rook to b8, and we will see that this knight on c3 is the target. So let's say h5, which is still a good move, and now queen to a5. Now we see the queen is attacking the knight on c3, and you might think, okay, but this is no issue because the pawn is defending. Well, let's assume that white tries to continue the attack. Let's say queen to h3, then comes already a move which is very strong. Rook takes b2, and now the king is restricted from taking on b2 because of the bishop takes a3 check, king to b3, for example, then queen b4 check, and the king is being checkmated. Not very nice. So white must do something about the c3 knight, and a move here might be bishop to f2. Now the queen is defending. However, this position is still very complicated. A move which might follow is, for example, rook to d8, and let's say white plays rook to h3, then black is just in time to play the very strong defensive move knight to f8. And this knight on f8 is a very reliable defender in a lot of cases. It cannot be exchanged, and it is defending a couple of squares, and has also an eye on e6. So black should be happy here. But this didn't happen in the game. In the game, black played bishop to d7 instead of bishop to e7. Now white just castled queenside, the long castle, and in a lot of variations where the queen just goes to d2 in these standard variations against the Sicilians, knight takes d4 is a good idea. However, in this position, black has basically two ideas. h5, securing this square, maybe for a knight, and also avoiding g4 pushes for the moment. And rook to c8, very logical, because we know this knight on c3 is not the strongest piece, and white must be forced to do something. However, in the game something different was played. Knight takes d4, and this centralizes the bishop. Now bishop takes d4, and there is maybe this unpleasant threat of taking on f6 at some point. maybe not immediately, but maybe soon. And also e5 doesn't look too nice, so let's say bishop to e7. Then you can play e5, but this would run into moves like bishop to c6, and white enjoys an advantage here. However, you could also just prepare the attack with moves like bishop to d3, and it is not so clear what black should do. In the game, not bishop to e7, but e5 was played. And this is a standard move in the 4 knights or the Sicilians in general, and if it works, it's great for black. If it does not, it's catastrophic. And here the second option is what happens here. So f takes e5, very logical move, d takes e5, and now queen to g3, pinning the pawn. The pawn cannot take because the queen on c7 is undefended. Bishop to d6, this looks smart, but a few moves earlier, black probably just overlooked that white can take on g7, and after a long castle, there is queen takes f6, e takes d5, and now the entire point of this variation. You were asked what you would play here in the beginning, and the Grand Master with white played very strong knight to d5. The queen is under attack. Taking here with the rook runs into bishop to e5, a little bit unpleasant. And the move queen takes d4 might be even okay, but not as strong as just knight to d5. So knight to d5 was played, and now black really has a hard time. According to the computer, bishop to e5 is the best defense, but then just queen takes h8, rook takes h8, and now the entire point of this, knight takes c7, king takes c7, and white is up in exchange. Not very pleasant. Black has the pair of bishops, but white also has 6 pawns, while black has only 5 pawns. So several disadvantages. Material in 2 regards. The pair of bishops as compensation is not enough. So therefore in the game, queen to c6 was played, and now a very strong move, an easy move, rook takes d4 with the very easy threat, rook c4. The entire game looks so pleasant and easy. However, calculating all this for white wasn't that easy. Bishop c5, and now rook to c4. White doesn't mind that the queens are going to be exchanged, because let's say they are exchanged. Now there's this huge issue with the bishop on c5. It can be defended, it is pinned, so black must do something about it. Let's say b6, but then, you guessed it, simply b4, and white again is winning material and black is completely lost. So other lines here, like let's say king to b8, also do not work great here because of queen takes c6, simply eliminating the defender of the c5 piece. Let's say b takes c6, attacking this knight. Well, then still rook takes c5, the bishop is gone, of course. You might say black is just in time to regain the piece, but after rook takes d5, you can see that white has 6 pawns, 2 rooks, 1 bishop, while black has 3 pawns, 2 rooks, and 1 bishop. So black is down 3 entire pawns and is completely lost. Let's say bishop to c6, rook takes d8 check, rook takes d8 check. A very brilliant game. I really like this, and it was pretty short. So let's just go back and see where black basically resigned, and it was after rook to c4. Here black just resigned. As mentioned, a brilliant game. Looks very simple, but there was calculation behind the moves of white. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like this video, hit the like button. If you want to see more of such videos, feel free to subscribe. If you want to support the channel, also feel free to comment. Engagement is always welcomed. And if you like this Sicilian game, you are going to like this one even more. See you in the next video.